good morning. How was breakfast? And how was the activity? Only okay? Technical issues. So technical issues kept us from posting the second part of the talk. So those of you who were here, you are lucky, because you are the only ones who saw it. So we are going to do, today is the last time I give you a talk about this. Maybe I'll come back later in the year. We have some new people, right? I see new people. Are you new? You are from St. Rita, and you are, oh my. Welcome, welcome. We'll treat you better than the rest. Anyway, we are doing the talk we call Techniques to Approach the Gospels. And I told you that we moved into Mark's Gospel. And then today we have a third session where we are going to look at a couple of passages to see if we develop this technique, this sensitivity to approach the Gospel. And then we will come back, I will come back when we change liturgical years, we move to Luke's Gospel, and then we are going to approach Luke's Gospel a little bit so that you can get a bit more information. Since we have some new people, do you remember anything of what we said first or second talk, anything that stood out that you would remember without looking at notes, something that you remember? Understanding the geography and the sociology to see who is Jesus talking to, that's very important. It's very, very good to take a look at where things are happening, what side of the lake, for instance, as you will see today. Sociology means to know who are the Pharisees, who are the Sadducees, who are the Zealots, different groups of people, and that's important, especially to identify who is Jesus talking to. Yes? Scripture is theology. We tend to think it's history, and it's Jesus did happen historically, we know that, but the Gospels are written much later to convey catechesis, to do theology. So that's probably the most important thing to remember. That's why we say that we shouldn't read the Gospels the way we read newspapers. It's more to read theologically. That's the most important thing, probably. We don't understand the cultural context in which the Gospels were produced, so we miss a lot. One thing we can do to bridge that gap is to read Old Testament, to understand more what happens in the Old Testament, because a lot of what happens in the New Testament is based on symbology and stories that were already phrased for the first time in the Old Testament. You are doing great. One more. That's what we said, they were produced by communities, so we don't look at authorship the way we do with modern books. Then it's important to know Mark's Gospel, we said it was written probably year 50. We think that Matthew and Luke were written later, as you will see today, with different purposes. Different communities have different concerns. In Matthew, for instance, it's very clear that there is a Jewish audience, very respectful of Jewish traditions, very knowledgeable of Jewish traditions, for instance. Luke seems to have a more universal concern. You are doing fantastic. So we didn't really need to pause the second talk because you are doing great. So one of the things we're going to do today, I wanted to propose that we continue. We left it with the baptism of Jesus, and then you know what happens next after the baptism. So in the Synoptic Tradition, one of the things we did was to separate the Synoptic Tradition, Mark, Matthew, Luke, from John's Gospel, which is completely different. In the Synoptic Tradition is one whole trip to Jerusalem, whereas in John's Gospel, Jesus goes back and forth. So if you are looking for historical accuracy with modern eyes, then you have to solve a problem, because in one place is one trip, in the other one is a continuous back and forth. Since it's theology, what we care is for something else. In the Synoptic Tradition, you see very clearly that Matthew and Luke have access to Mark. Mark sets a timeline. John the Baptist preaches in the desert, then Jesus, then he does a couple of miracles, then he goes to be baptized, then after the baptism, the temptations happen, which is the first thing we're going to look at today. And then you will see how the three Gospels will take this basic frame, this basic timeline, and they will develop it a little bit more. So I wanted to show you this. Sorry, I don't see anything anymore. So this is the temptations in Mark's Gospel. At once the Spirit drove him out into the desert, and he remained in the desert for 40 days, tempted by Satan. He was among wild beasts, and the angels ministered to him. What do you think? If we are developing this bit of sensitivity to approach the gospel, what do you see? And before we do this, 1 second, I will show you what Luke is going to do with this. Do you see it's a little longer? So Mark sets the very specific stage, and then Matthew and Luke will develop it. In Mark's gospel, we know that Jesus was tempted. Tempted means tested. We also said that the gospels are translations. So we could have, temptation sounds very, in Greek it's a test. He was tested. And the devil will test Jesus, the Pharisees will test Jesus constantly. It's good to remember that the basic word means test. And you see what Mark does, and see what Luke will do. You see? This is me preaching to the left, other priest preaching to the right, okay? That's a joke. You were saying, what did you see? 40 days, and that's where we get the 40 days for Lent, right? So if we knew Old Testament, we would immediately know what this 40 means. What do you think? So we develop a sensitivity that when we see 40, since nobody was there counting how many days, that's not the point. It's not a historical point, historical fact in this way. It's a theological statement. So what is 40? And that's the normal explanation. We say that the 40 years that the people of Israel wandered in the desert, which is crucial to understand. But there is somebody else that spent 40 days in the desert also. Moses. So by saying that he spent 40 days in the desert, Mark, we think, is making a reference both to that experience of wandering in the desert of the people of Israel, and remember, 200 plus miles between Egypt and Israel. Even if you ask me to lead the people of Israel, it doesn't take 40 years, okay? 200 and some miles. So it's a theological statement. Even in the Old Testament, we make theological statements. And the second thing is that Mark is telling us, with 2 sentences, that Jesus is the new Moses. As simple as this. What else do you see? Part of the technique I'm trying to convey to you is sensitivity to what it says. Writing in that time was so expensive that we have to pay attention to everything. It's not like now that a website, there's whole lots of material everywhere. In that time, writing was a very difficult enterprise, so anything that says there, it's important. So what else do you see? And we've preached about this. Phil is saying so that the people watching this online can hear you. It's a process that was initiated by the Spirit. So Jesus goes to the desert, led by the Spirit. Isn't that beautiful? Not only beautiful that then when we go to Matthew and Luke, and they keep that, then we know that's important. This is called, so the techniques, technically, what we call is we call them criticisms. And this would be a source criticism. It's how it's called, technically. And source criticism would tell you that because they keep that sentence, and look at Matthew, look at Mark, and they keep that, that gives you information about the importance of that statement. Do you know what I mean? Any questions? So we're going to look at Luke. So filled with the Holy Spirit, Jesus returned from the Jordan. Now we know, Joel, you will telling us how important was geography. Now Luke wants to tell us that the place where the ministry, the story of Jesus begins, is the Jordan River. You remember that we discussed this? where the Jordan River was the boundary between the territory of Israel and foreign territory, north to south. It's the information that is giving us there. Was led by the Spirit into the desert for 40 days to be tempted by the devil. He ate nothing during those days, and when they were over, he was hungry. The devil said to him, and then it develops 3 temptations. Matthew, we changed the order, but we've discussed these temptations many times. Those are temptations of identity. The identity of Jesus will be one of the main themes in the Gospels, more for Luke and Matthew. If you are the Son of God, if you are the Son of God, if you are the Son of God, 3 times. 3 times means all the possible times. In that culture, to say something 3 times, 3 days, 3 is an important number. What else do we see? It is written, you see, Satan will always speak to Jesus with Old Testament statements. You see that? One does not, where are we? If you are the Son of God, command this stone to become bread. Jesus answered him, it is written, one does not live by bread alone. Then he took up and showed him, so what could that temptation be? For Mark, it was not important to develop what temptations there were. For Luke and Matthew, they think it's important. Maybe those communities are struggling with something, or they want more information about this. So the first temptation, if you are the Son of God, command this stone to become bread. And how many times bread comes up in the Gospels, right? So what do you think? If you are the Son of Man, if the Son of God, turn this stone into bread. What could that temptation be? Any ideas? Sorry? Temptation of the flesh, of human need, maybe, no? The most basic human need. Okay, that's a good one. What else could it be? Yes? Being a show-off, showing your power, yeah, to become a miracle worker. It's about identity. So the devil is telling Jesus, so show me. Boom. I can do that. I can turn this beautiful flower, this is very nice, into a piece of bread. Or the idea that bread is what the people want, something very basic, no? Bread and circus was what the sentence in the antiquity about what the Romans did, no? To keep the people happy, give them circus and give them bread. It could be any of these things. What about the second one? I think it's very clear, no? The devil said to him, I shall give to all this power and their glory, for it has been handed over to me. I may give it to whomever I wish. All this will be yours if you worship me. Jesus said to him in reply, you shall worship the Lord your God, and him alone you shall serve. So what temptation is that? The temptation of power. That's what we're preaching about today. Power. You see, and the gospel is placing, in any of the 3 gospels, placing this at the beginning of the story. So it means that let's get the temptations out of the way, but the temptation of power will be a constant in Jesus' life. It will always be there. And what's the third one? Then he led him to Jerusalem. Weren't they in the desert? Theological statement, I take you to Jerusalem. He let him stand on the parapet of the temple and said to him, if you are the Son of God, throw yourself down from here, for it is written, he will command his angels concerning you to guard you, and with their hands they will support you, lest you dash your foot against a stone. Old Testament statement. Jesus said to him in reply, you shall not put the Lord your God to the test. So what temptation is this? It may become, let's hold on to that because that's a very interesting statement. The temptation here is to test God, and don't we test sometimes God? If God exists, my cancer will be healed. That's testing God. But we also test others. No, if I do this, would that person love me? If I'm arrested tomorrow by the police, how many friends will I keep? Seriously. So let's try. I do something tonight to see if I get arrested and see how many friends do I keep tomorrow. Depending on what I get arrested for, right? Yes? So that's not very unconditional, right? We want to be loved unconditionally. I think we understand each other, correct? Do you see the testing? And it's very interesting because for Luke, it was very important to say, when the devil had finished every temptation, so these temptations represent all the temptations, he departed from him for a time. So when is this time? If we are developing this sensitivity, we have to think, what is this time? And it's at the Garden of Gethsemane, Jesus says, please, let this cup pass from me. He's tempted once again, not to be who he is, not to be Jesus, the Son of God, who needs to go to the cross for the salvation of all. Isn't that great? But see how little Mark did and how much Luke develops. Luke is we think 25 years later. So a whole generation almost, 30 years after, 25 years after Jesus dies, we get Mark. And remember, open text, it's not like we have this date, that's when it got published. No, it's an open text. And then we know that year 80, more or less, that's when we believe that Matthew and Luke were produced. And what is very clear from here and from this pattern, from this timeline that I'm showing you, baptism, temptations, ministry in Galilee, calling of the disciples, this timeline that the other two Gospels will follow, that's how we see that Matthew and Luke had access to Mark. Yes? We believe that the scripture is inspired, but it's inspired through human nature. So I want to think that these communities have been living the gospel, they have been developing things, they have been proposing questions, and the gospels try to answer to that experience. Yes, Mike?
How were the gospels disseminated to the others in that period?
You will have to watch the first talk, because we only have half an hour. Maybe we will. That's a little bit what we discussed. We said, you remember that when we did the summary, we didn't remember this. It was oral traditions first, that then during the third half of the second third of the first century, they get into written documents. But it's a great question.
So you have that online?
Yes. Yes. Very good. So I wanted to jump because, these talks are mini talks, and we are poor, and we need to move the studio from one place to the other, unless somebody wants to make us a donation. So the famous multiplication of bread and loaves. I wanted to look at that to see if we have developed some sensitivity. So I will do this quickly. There are the first multiplication, the one for the 5,000, is present in all four Gospels. It's one of the few, besides the Passion, that obviously is in all four Gospels. The first miracle of the multiplication of loaves and fish is in all four Gospels, which is very unusual. Two of the Gospels, Mark and Matthew, have a second multiplication. We call it the one of the 4,000. Okay? And I wanted to develop that sensitivity with you. Why would you explain a very similar story twice? So we have the first one, and we have the second one. You see? And I wanted to see if you could tell me, why would someone decide to have the story twice?
Well, I mean, it's important.
It's important, but maybe being once already shows that it's important. It is important. We believe that when something is in all four Gospels, historical. For sure, it happened. It's not symbology, it's not some tale, it is historical. It happened. But why would Matthew and Mark have it twice?
They're writing for different communities.
Maybe they're writing for different communities. And that explains why we have it twice. Okay? Yes? Maybe it happened twice.
Well, no, maybe it happened more often. Maybe it wasn't. We look at it as this one thing that happened in that one moment, and maybe it was happening at multiple places, and we've captured 2 of those stories.
As we could have captured 15, you mean. That's very good. Maybe it happened twice, or maybe it happened even more than twice, and that's one way. Yes?
I think that it's different viewpoints, like if you and I saw an accident
Mm-hmm.
and the police asked us to respond, you would have different information than I would have. We saw the same accident, but we captured different information because of our eyesight or our personalities or such.
I think that's a very good explanation on how details are different for the same story from different Gospels. Great way to look at it. So the baptism, I told you, for Mark, it was a personal experience. For Luke, it was an external experience, no? This is, why do we have the same miracle twice? It's different. It's not, I'm going to put them together. So look at this, Mark 6, 31, 44, and the next one is Mark 8, 1, 9. Okay, I'm going to ask you to read it quickly. We're going to read this one quickly, and then we're going to read the other one quickly. And then you tell me, what do you think? Where are you, more or less? First question, do you think, if you are developing a sensitivity to expressions and to words, anything is jumping at you? The disciples want to send them away. Jesus wants to feed them. Good. That's basic element in the story, right? What else do you see? Which will be, the comment was the apostles questioning him, which is a constant, especially in Mark's gospel. Mark's gospel is the most critical of the disciples, as you will see in Sunday's gospel today also. Most critical. They don't get it. They never get it. That's Eucharistic language. You should see that there. There is the language of the Eucharist. And all Gospels will capture that. I like the capturing expression. Capturing Eucharistic language. What else? You are preaching. You are preaching. You are looking for elements for a homily. Right? I want you to be more basic. Look at things. If I told you anything is there for a purpose, for instance, why would it tell us to have them sit down in groups on the green grass? Why? What is the point of telling us? And you could say, historically, Jesus told them to sit, right? You can read the newspaper this way, but why would Jesus tell people to sit down? And you know what? It's a translation. The original Greek says recline. Doesn't say sit. It says recline. Thank you, translators. Sitting is modern. We sit to eat. Who reclines to eat? It has something to do with the experience of Passover, yes.
Reclining was for people
Free. Free people at that time ate reclining. The Romans ate reclining. In the night of Passover, people have to eat standing. Now Jesus tells them, recline. You could say, that's crazy, but otherwise tell me why it's there, and why would it be there, not for us, modern readers, but for someone reading this in 1st century Palestine. Yes? Those who ate were 5,000 men. So I was at a mass once, And the person who was reading was a woman who felt very strongly about inclusive language. And then she said, those who ate were 5,000 men and women. Thank you for defiling the gospel. Why does it say men? It says men. I'm sorry. It says men. Why? Now imagine I would have 5,000 people here waiting for me to come out, to get orders from me. What are we describing? An army. Don't you see it? We are describing an army. 5,000 people in the grass waiting for Jesus to tell them what to do. When the person said 5,000 men and women, that's it. Or when people look at this and say, oh, it wasn't 5,000, it was 12,000. Because 5,000 men, 5,000 women, and some children. Thank you again for being an idiot. You know what I mean? It says 5,000 men because that's the point it's trying to make. Do you see? Very good. Where is this happening? If geography was important, where is this happening? I have 9 more minutes. A deserted place where there is grass. Okay. Where? Okay, we're going to go to the next one. This happens a couple of chapters later. What do you see? Oh, what happened? Oh, what did I do? No, it was fine, no. What did I do here? Oh, yes, yes. Oh, I showed the outcome. So, in those days, again, so this is no accident. Oh, what do we do with this story? Let's put it wherever. No, no, again, this happened. What do you see? He loses 1,000 people. And I have no explanation for that one.
It is not men, it's people, so that it could include women and children.
Maybe it's telling us that the group was smaller already, right? We are so obsessed about numbers. I was obsessed about numbers. Now I gave up with Sacred Heart. Whatever, you know? What else do you see? He ordered the crowd to sit down on the ground. So still, it says recline. So we're missing that connection with the Passover theme.
He's a little more compassionate than he is ordering. Like, my heart is in pity because they silenced me. And
Yeah.
instead of being like, go figure it out.
Yeah. Good homily. It is a good homily. Oh, no. The availability is quite the same. What is different is the leftovers. There are 12 baskets left over in the first one, 7 baskets left over on the second one. And you know what? A few verses later, Jesus will say, don't you get it? How many baskets to the disciples? How many baskets were left the first time? 12. How many baskets are left the second time? 7. It says it. You go and you read it. It says that. So, what's the point of 12 baskets left or 7 baskets left? What's the importance? Again, if you're reading the newspaper or an encyclopedia or Wikipedia, history. There were actually 12 baskets left, and now there are 7 baskets left. But if we are doing theology, what's the difference? What's 12? The tribes of Israel. It's 12. What is 7? Huh? Fulfillment. What else do you, yes, what else do you hear 12? I'm 7. Sacraments, yeah. 7 deacons, for instance. 7 days. 7 will be creation, 7 will be, let me ask you, where are we now? What side of the lake? Oh, now I told you. What side of the lake? East, west. Americans tell you east or west, and I'm completely lost. East, west, left. We have to say right. Which one is Israel? So, you have the lake. Oh, by the way, I have a map. That should help. If you develop this sensitivity, you read a little bit couple of verses before it tells you he's in Tyre. Do you see Tyre? The region of Tyre is north, to the left of the Jordan. I'm not making my point here. Anyway, we think that the first multiplication happens on this side, and the second multiplication happens on this side. Left and right. Now, let me suggest, because we don't have time, that's great not to have time, because look at your Bibles, look at the first story, look at the second story, and see what happens in the middle. Wouldn't that be a logical way to answer the question, why is it twice? So the gospel is built. One story here, one story here, so maybe we need to look at what happens in the middle. Do you know what happens in the middle? More things happen in the middle. I think this happens in the middle. You know that one? For me, that's one of the most amazing texts in the gospel. A foreign woman, she's fantastic. A foreign woman approaches Jesus. Jesus says, no, you are not 12. You don't have the 12 in your shirt. You know, you are not from Israel. You're not one of us, so I'm not going to help you. And she says, I think you should help me anyway. And Jesus says, woman, Jesus knew that women are always right. And then he said, oh yes, I have to help you. And then in foreign territory, he gets the second multiplication of breads and loaves. You see what I mean? This is developing a sensitivity that helps us to read the gospel the way it was originally written. Do you know what I mean? I have 4 people convinced because they are nodding. I have 20 people not very convinced, which is okay, which is fine. Syrophoenician is a foreign woman. Matthew will say a Canaanite woman.
So the first miracle was just for Jews, and then after this, where Jesus is saying that yes, he needs to help the Greek woman also.
I think so. That's my theory, yeah.
Indicating that we now, maybe in the second one, there's Jews and Gentiles, and he's come to preach.
And isn't that one of the concerns of the communities who are producing the gospel later? How do we incorporate people who are coming to the communities from a Greek background, whereas it was only Jews at the beginning? You see? Even if you disagree, do you see what do we mean by developing a sensitivity, by looking at things with a little bit more detail, etc., etc.? We don't have more time today, and you don't get me until, I don't know, maybe April. Aren't you happy? Our director of liturgy will come the next time and give you a talk, right? About Lectio Divina. You know what that is? You will find out that day. Any questions, anything else? Those are very quick talks. My attempt was to give you an invitation to look at things, like to develop a technique, again, to develop a sensitivity to approach the Gospels. Thank you very much, everyone.